Jay here for Stretford, Paddock, and this is the Paper Talk. As you can see, we're outside Old Trafford. Later on tonight, Manchester United will host Southampton, where United could go into the top four. It's been a fantastic run, both just before lockdown and post-lockdown, and also this weekend, results went our way. Leicester and Chelsea both losing, so it's in United's hands now. We can get into the top four, which is a pretty remarkable turnaround considering how sort of far behind we were following the defeat to Burnley. I remember standing outside here after the game, and everyone was feeling pretty low and thought that top four had gone, but it's certainly not the case anymore. Champions League football could be heading back here if United take care of the business that we need to take care of. I know there'll be talk about Manchester City and what's happened with them. I'll get to that a little bit later. Now, in terms of United's squad tonight, there's been some paper talk that both Ethan Laird and Teden Mengi could feature in the squad at some point. Teden Mengi posted something on Twitter. It was like an egg timer, an hourglass with the hashtag MUFC. He has been involved in the squad before. He was involved with the squad for the Aston Villa game. So there's talk that him and Ethan Laird could both be involved. Both youngsters, both doing really well for the academy team. And it's only a matter of time before we see them involved in the first team at Manchester United at some point. Now, we saw the benefits last season of bringing in these youngsters towards the end of the season. We saw it with Mason Greenwood, of course, how he made his debut obviously here against Cardiff at the end of the season, how just bringing them in towards the end of the season prepares them for next season. And that may well be in the thoughts of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. He may well be looking at it thinking, if I start getting them involved in the squad now, further down the line, they're going to be a bit more ready than they would be if I was just forced to throw them in due to injuries. So we'll see how that one pans out. Now, one milestone that will be reached tonight, if he plays, which he's expected to, is David De Gea will reach 400 games for Manchester United. Not David De Gea, like I called him the other day, David De Gea. Now, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has been speaking about him ahead of the game, saying that he's a player that deserves to be challenging for trophies and winning trophies because he's not won the league since his second season here. So Ole says a player of his talents should be challenging for the very top honours, and that's what we want to see for David De Gea, and that's what we should expect to see if Manchester United continue playing the way they have been playing recently under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Now, in terms of transfers going out, one of the stories doing the rounds is about Alexis Sanchez. Now, Alexis Sanchez, of course, has been on loan at Inter Milan. He did quite well and he picked up an injury. Now, there's a bit of brinkmanship going on with Manchester United in the sense that Inter want Alexis Sanchez, United don't really want Alexis Sanchez, but it's just a case of whether Inter or United can come to some sort of agreement as to how much he's going to cost, or whether Inter are going to pay the full wage of Alexis Sanchez, which is really, I think it's in the region of £500,000 a week. So he's on a ridiculous contract. We know that when we went in for him from Arsenal, we paid him a lot. Manchester City were in for him, of course. Mkhitaryan went the other way as part of a swap deal, but the real sort of talking point when Alexis Sanchez arrived at Old Trafford was the wage structure that he was on and how it broke the wage structure here. He was on more money than anyone else, and it caused all sorts of problems. So Inter aren't willing to pay those wages. In the past, United have been paying part of it, but if the deal was to be made permanent, or if the loan was to be extended, or however that would work, then Inter would have to come in and pay some money. Conte is obviously a big fan of Alexis Sanchez. United want rid of him. There should be a possibility of a deal being made here. It shouldn't be too difficult. A lot may depend on whether Inter get Champions League football, because if they get Champions League football, which they're expected to, they'll have more revenue, they'll have more money to spend, and they'll want better players. And regardless of how poor he was for Manchester United, Alexis Sanchez on his day is still a class player, and he's someone that Antonio Conte rates. So we'll see how that one pans out. A little bit of brinkmanship going on at the minute between Inter and Manchester United, but we could expect to see Alexis Sanchez make the deal permanently to Milan or extend his loan. It's more than likely going to be that he makes a permanent move, but we just need to see how that all pans out. From one player in Inter to another, this one has been doing the rounds for so long, I've forgotten when we first started reporting on it, and that's Koulibaly, Khalidi Koulibaly over in Napoli. Now, this went cool. United were meant to be in for him, and then it went cool. Now, he's been speaking recently where he's been talking about the possibility of staying in Napoli. If I'm brutally honest, I don't see United going back in for him. I don't even think we were in for him. It was a transfer that was suggested before we bought Harry Maguire. So the idea of us now going in for him, I think he's 29 years old. The price tag is around 100 million. It's almost non-existent. But he's been speaking to Gazzetta dello Sport, and he says, in football, you never know what happens. I never spoke to Napoli about leaving. If we have to find a solution, we will find it, but I've never talked about the transfer market. He then goes on to say, at the moment, I still have a 3-year contract, and I am not thinking of anything else but Napoli. Listen, I just don't see this transfer happening. I know some people have suggested that it could still be a possibility, that he could be brought in here to partner Harry Maguire, but I'm very, very sceptical about that one. It'd take a massive amount of money to get him here. He isn't a youngster. He isn't even a player who you could expect to be here for 7 or 8 years. You're probably going to get 3 or 4 years out of him at best. And to pay £100 million for a player that's never played in the Premier League, that's almost 30 years old, seems like a massive gamble, and it seems like one Manchester United wouldn't be willing to take. Now, a much more likely transfer is that of Jadon Sancho. We know there's been a little bit of a, let's say, impasse between Manchester United and Dortmund. There's been comments and press briefings flying around. Dortmund have obviously said that they want a certain price, or have suggested they want a certain price. There's been stories coming out of Old Trafford that United are willing to offer a lot less. There was a story doing the rounds a few weeks ago that United were only willing to offer 50 million. I think that was paper talk. I think that was sort of fake news, shall we say. I don't think United think we can get a player of the calibre of Jadon Sancho for only £50 million. I think we know we need to pay a lot more. Now, the rumour is that Dortmund want around £110, £116 million. That's probably a little bit more than Manchester United are willing to pay. Now, the sporting director of Dortmund, who speaks to the press quite a lot, he recently said, Jadon has a valid contract with us, and we would be happy if he is still with us next season. To think about anything else, the timing would have to be right. And secondly, our price expectations would have to be met 100%, and the price tag there is around the £107 million mark. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know. It may well take something in that region to make Dortmund sell Jadon Sancho to Manchester United. Let's not forget, yes, Dortmund are a selling club, but they're not skin. They're not one of those clubs that has to keep selling their best players for low prices. They do sell the best players, but they usually get decent whack for them. It's a bit like Leicester in that sense. You always get the feeling that Leicester keeps selling players, but they sell them for decent prices because they're a well-run club. They're a club with money, and that's the case with Dortmund. They're not a club that will just let players go on the cheap. So if Manchester United do want Jadon Sancho, roughly around the £100 million mark does make sense to me. Now, United could be doing a little bit of kidology here because we've been linked with Ousmane Dembele from Barcelona. How realistic that link is, I don't know. Now, what usually happens when you're in for a player is sometimes these stories will come out that you're looking at alternatives. Remember when we were in for Aaron Wan-Bissaka last season, there was a bit of a breakdown, not breakdown, but the negotiations were sort of dragging out a little bit. Then all of a sudden, we started getting these stories in the press that United were looking at Max Aarons from Norwich as an alternative. And that seems to me to be the case of United sort of letting the press know this so that it makes the selling club think, oh, hang on a minute, maybe if we don't take that price, they'll go elsewhere and buy someone else. That may well be the case when it comes to the Dembele stories, because it's not come out of nowhere. He has been linked with us in the past, but it's not a story that's had much momentum, and it's certainly not a transfer that is likely to happen for what it's worth, in my opinion, because there hasn't been that many stories about him coming to Manchester United. And usually when a transfer happens, the press get wind of it. You remember I spoke about Harry Maguire, about Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Those stories were doing the rounds for weeks and weeks before the transfers happened. Bruno Fernandes was doing the rounds for months and months before the transfer happened. Dembele, not so much. So it sounds like it may well be a little bit of kidology. We'll wait and see how that pans out. Personally, I think Jadon Sancho is tailor-made for Manchester United. I think United need to get him. Yes, we've got Mason Greenwood, we've got Anthony Martial, and we've got Marcus Rashford, but if we're playing 3 up top, or even if we're playing 2, you need options, and Jadon Sancho would be a great option. Dembele, I'm not a massive fan, if I'm being brutally honest. He's a good player. Is he in the same sort of calibre as Jadon Sancho, as Anthony Martial, as Mason Greenwood, and as Marcus Rashford? I don't think he is. I think he's a little bit of a sort of the next tier along. So we'll wait and see how that one pans out. But at the moment, Jadon Sancho to Manchester United is still rumbling on, and we can expect it to rumble on for quite some time in the future as well. I think this is going to drag on for the next few weeks at least, and then we'll see how we get on once the transfer window is open. I know deals can be done now, but it may well be we have to wait until the season ends to find out what's happening with that one. Now, in terms of the season ending, we know now we've had the Manchester City decision. What does it mean for Manchester United? Well, it's simple. Top 4. We need to get top 4 to get Champions League football. That's what it means. We always knew that, and that has always been the goal here at Manchester United, and nothing has changed. We shouldn't be worrying about Manchester City and bans and appeals and all that sort of stuff. We should be focused on the job in hand, and that is getting top 4 for Manchester United to get into the Champions League. And we're now in a position to do that. We win against Southampton, we go into the top 4. We've got winnable games. We go to Leicester on the final day. We beat them. Top 4 is ours, and that's a great season for Manchester United. That's the sort of season many of us expected. We thought we were a bit too far off to do a title challenge. That's not materialised, and we didn't expect it to. But top 4 is something we should be aiming for. It's something we should be able to achieve. So forget about Manchester City and what's been going on down the road with all them lot. Doesn't matter. The goal has always been to get Champions League football by getting into the top 4, and that's what Manchester United could do and can do and should do. We've also got the Europa League, of course, so if you don't get into the Champions League via the Premier League, you can go for the Europa League. We did that before under Jose. Jose more or less focused on the Europa League in January. He sort of rested players in the league and was just focused on that in Europe. We don't need to do that this season. We can get into the Champions League via the Premier League, and that's what we should be doing, and that's what we can achieve starting here tonight against Southampton. Now, if you're watching the game tonight, make sure you tune in, or even if you're not watching it, make sure you tune in to the Paddock watch along. It'll be hashtag Paddock Match Day, where we'll be covering the game. We'll have Adam McCullough, you'll have Stephen Housen, you'll have Joe, you'll have Andy Tate as well, be making an appearance. They'll be going through all the game. We'll have the pre-match. During the game, we'll have the watch along, and we'll also have other post-match reaction, including the fan cams as well. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned to Stretford Paddock. I've been Jay. This has been the Paper Talk. Thanks for watching.